There's a lot of very polarizing questions in anime as a whole that people tend to take sides on. Recent ones that come to mind are things like, is Eren correct in his launching of the Rumbling, or was William Vengeance correct in his siding with the elves in Black Clover? However, the question that we're going to talk about today was brought up years ago. Unfortunately, long before I had a YouTube page talking about anime. But just because it was brought up a long time ago doesn't mean that there isn't still people on two sides of the answer, and doesn't mean that the answer isn't important to explore. Because the question we're talking about today is arguably one of the most important questions ever posed by anime, and it's actually been a question posed by literature for generations. The question we're answering today is, was Madara correct? Or more specifically, was Madara's want to enact Infinite Tsukiyomi the right thing to do? For as long as Madara and the Infinite Tsukiyomi plan have existed, the Naruto fandom has been split into two camps on whether it was the correct thing to do or not. But what's interesting is that the core fundament of this question has been prosed in literature for as long as literature has existed, which is why the fact that there's such a heated conversation around whether Infinite Tsukiyomi was the correct thing to do shouldn't be surprising. You know what else shouldn't be surprising? Me fitting a plug in right about here. So before we get to talking about morality and choices, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And every day you make choices, and if you guys are making the choice to not follow my other two YouTube pages, guys, well, it's the wrong one. I have two other YouTube pages, NC Gamer 23, where instead of talking anime, I play video games, and Hammer's Collection, where instead of talking anime, I build things from them. So Madara, one of the most interesting, well-spoken, and polarizing characters in the entirety of Naruto. And this is to be expected. The majority of the show was building up to him as a villain, which is why how he died seems so disrespectful to the community. You see, for hundreds, and I mean literally hundreds of episodes, every event of Naruto built up to Madara coming back and fighting. But we never necessarily knew why Madara wanted to fight. Like, was he just coming back to wipe out the ninja world? Did he want to live longer? Did he not like the state of the ninja world as is? And it wasn't until pretty deep into the war arc, actually, that we finally got Madara's motivations for coming back and starting the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. Obviously, the reason that Madara started the Fourth Great Shinobi World War is because he was being tampered with by Black Zetsu, who essentially made him start the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. But that's not what I want to talk about. I'm going to leave Kaguya and the Otsutsukis out of this. We're talking specifically about Madara and his plan, because once you take in the fact that he's being manipulated by Black Zetsu, it changes the end goal and also takes his will out of it. So for the sake of this video, we're going to look at Madara as a singular entity. In order to talk about Madara's motivations, though, we have to talk about Madara's life, because his motivations are largely driven by his lifetime events. And the answer to whether or not he's correct in his goal of Infinite Tsukiyomi actually lies in his history. You see, Madara, just like Hashirama, was born during the Warring States period, a time before the formation of the ninja villages. And in the Land of Fire, there was many clans, not just the Senju and the Uchiha, the Sarutobi, the Nara, the Akamichi, all there. Same with the Uzumaki. But the reason it was called the Warring States period is because anytime a smaller clan, aka not the Senju or the Uchiha, wanted to launch an offensive on another clan, they would hire either the Senju or the Uchiha to help them launch that offensive. Because at the time, the Senju and the Uchiha were the two strongest clans. So let's say you're a small clan trying to invade another small clan's village. You would hire the Senju to help you so you would win your fight, because both the Senju and the Uchiha were mercenaries. However, if the other small clan heard that you were about to invade with the Senjus, they would hire the Uchiha. And since the Senju and the Uchiha were evenly matched, this would result in multiple battles over thousands of years, with neither truly stepping up as the superior. This happens for about 2,000 years, and then Hashirama and Madara are born. We know that they're reincarnations of Indra and Ashura, but once again, I'm leaving the Otsutsukis out of this. Madara is the son of the current leader of the Uchihas, and Hashirama is the son of the current leader of the Senju. Because the Warring States period has so much war, children have to get into battle very young. We're talking 6, 7 years old, they're pushed out onto the battlefield. And because of this, you grow up pretty quickly, especially when your siblings die. You see, Hashirama actually had 3 brothers, and 2 of them were killed during the Warring States period. Madara, on the other hand, only had 1 brother, Izuna. You see, him and Izuna were borderline inseparable, and also exactly the same in terms of power. But Madara had another brother, and that was Hashirama, somebody he met multiple times outside of the context of battle. And over time, him and Hashirama became friends. But when news of their friendship got back to their respective clan-leading fathers, both of their respective fathers used this as an opportunity to kill the next heads of their opposition family. And just like that, Hashirama and Madara began to realize that friendship between two warring families simply couldn't happen. This was furthermore reinforced when Hashirama lost some of his brothers. However, Hashirama still had Tobirama, who was actually the most ardent and outspoken person when it came to forgiving the Uchihas in order to stop war. However, Tobirama was also a very good fighter, and Tobirama was often paired up against Izuna. And one day, Tobirama killed Izuna after he created Flying Raijin. The reason Tobirama had to create Flying Raijin in order to beat Izuna, however, though, is relatively interesting. You see, Madara and Izuna knew how they had to awaken their MSs. They heard they had to kill somebody close to them. So both Madara and Izuna snuck into a boy's tent, a friend of theirs, and murdered him together. This boy, mind you, was an Uchiha. And after they murdered him, they both awoke their MSs. So because of this, Tobirama was relatively outmatched in his battles against Izuna for a while, which is why he had to create new jutsu to match him up against him. But the loss of Izuna hit Madara much harder than any of Hashirama's lost brothers hit Hashirama. You could equate this to the fact that Hashirama still had living brothers, or the fact that Madara was Indra's reincarnation and therefore hate was kind of in his blood. Regardless, now Madara, the current head of the Uchihas at the time, has lost the person he's closest to on Earth, Izuna, his brother, and at a very, very young age, mind you. See, this is a sentiment shared by both sides, that as the world currently is, people are fighting in wars much too young. This is felt more ardently on Tobirama and Hashirama's side, specifically from Tobirama, but still very much so from Madara. However, with Izuna's death, the Uchiha were significantly weaker, and therefore the Senju reached out to them and asked for peace. However, Madara did not want to take up this peace offer. Instead, he took Izuna's eyes and melded them with his own and awoke EMS, and used this newfound strength in order to challenge the Senju one last time. However, since both Tobirama and Hashirama were free to fight him now, he loses. Focus on that. He loses. You'll see, surprisingly, this is a trend in Madara's life. However, after he's defeated by both Hashirama and Tobirama, he tells Hashirama the only way they'll ever achieve peace is that Hashirama kills himself, and Hashirama accepts, stepping forward to kill himself so Madara can become the Hokage of their newfound village. However, Madara, seeing that Hashirama is real about killing himself, he stops him, no longer wanting more bloodshed between the Senju and the Uchiha. And it's at this point, and only this point, that the Senju and the Uchiha come together to make Konoha. However, as for who's going to lead Konoha, a problem arises. You see, Hashirama wants Madara to be the Hokage. Hashirama believes that Madara is more well-suited for it. However, Tobirama, being the genius that he was, told Hashirama and Madara they should put it up to a democratic vote of all of the clans involved in Konoha. And once again, Madara loses. And just like that, Hashirama takes over as the first Hokage, with his brother Tobirama serving as his advisor, personal bodyguard, and shadow Hokage. See, this is a common misconception. It wasn't Madara who was acting as Hashirama's shadow Hokage. In fact, a lot of the things that Madara would do while still being loyal to Konoha were not condoned by Hashirama. But just about as fast as Hashirama was elected Hokage, Madara started to get upset, because Madara believed that within Konoha, the Uchihas would be suppressed. This is actually why Hashirama wanted Madara to be the Hokage, in order to assuage these fears and show the Uchiha that they were just as welcome into Konoha as the Senju. So Madara started to talk to the Uchihas and tell them how they're gonna be suppressed by the Senju ruling class. However, the Uchihas had just got out of the warring state period. They had fought for quite literally 2,000 years and lost just as many brothers and sisters as Madara. And currently, they were living in relative harmony with the Senju, and the Yamanaka, the Sarutobi, and the Nara. Things were good. The village was actually thriving in its foundation. Madara was a bit like that one friend who can't seem to have fun anywhere. Even if you're in the middle of Disneyland and there's no lines and you're getting onto every single ride in 10 minutes, they're still complaining about something. And that's who Madara was. See, say what you will about the future of Konoha. I know I have a take on it, and how the Senjus actually quite literally did become a ruling class and still are, and how Hokageship is largely passed down through nepotism. But at this current time, Madara didn't know the future. He was just complaining about Hashirama. And therefore, even if his fears were warranted with how the future of Konoha played out, at the current time, there was nothing to worry about. Oh, by the way, I lied earlier. Madara was the oldest of 5. He lost 3 of his other siblings when they were very young. But the thing that truly worried Madara was how he and Hashirama's view of the future of Konoha differed. You see, other ninja villages popped up because of Konoha's foundation. Essentially, other countries saw 2 of the strongest clans on Earth come together and make a village, and they thought, well, we should probably make those 2 out of defense. Hashirama wanted to cooperate openly with those other villages. However, Madara saw the strength of Konoha and wanted to use said strength to suppress the other villages. However, since Hashirama was in charge, the approach that Konoha was taking to the other villages was peaceful cooperation. And this didn't necessarily sit well with Madara. So much so, he actually went to the Hidden Stone village and beat the piss out of Mu and Inoki, and essentially told them,
"You will be subservient to Konoha. We are much stronger than you."
However, Madara's fears were truly brought forward to him when he discovered the stone tablet. You see, we know the stone tablet was altered by Black Setsu to make this happen. But from Madara's point of view, he came across a stone tablet that talked about how the Uchiha and the Senju have tried to find peace multiple multiple times throughout the Warring States period, and every single time it's failed. So Madara decided that Konoha was a failed experiment, and tried to convince both the Uchiha and Hashirama of this. However, once again, because Konoha was thriving and happy, nobody believed him, and this actually made the Uchiha kind of get rid of Madara. He was no longer the Uchiha clan leader. Once again, he's lost. But this time, it's an emotional battle. Essentially, the Uchiha told Madara that they have more faith in Hashirama and Konoha than they do him. And because of this loss, finally Madara has had enough and he leaves Konoha. And he attacks Konoha multiple times, mind you. Not just the one time he pulls up with Kurama, there was many attempts prior to that. And in every single one of those attempts, loses. Well, it's not that he loses, he's stalemated. See, ever since Madara awoke his Sharingan, once he decided that him and Hashirama couldn't be friends, he has been trying to kill Hashirama in every battle they've ever had. However, Hashirama's never wanted to kill Madara. In fact, he would rather kill himself than Madara. And so, every single fight where they've tied, that is exactly what Hashirama wanted. So every tie and or stalemate they've ever had, also a loss for Madara. But then obviously there's the big attack on Konoha that Madara launches with Kurama. They both fight themselves to the brink of exhaustion, which is insane to say because they both have limitless chakra, and their battle is so intense it makes the final valley of the end. I'm sorry. And it's at this point, after Tobirama quite literally begs Hashirama kills Madara. And once again, Madara loses. Madara knew he was going to lose. This is an incredibly important character plot point. You see, Madara knew he was going to lose against Hashirama, so much so that he quite literally programmed his right eye to use Izanami after his death to bring him back to life. And once Hashirama has buried and left his corpse, Madara comes back to life. And once Madara has been revived, he goes and hides with a mouthful of Hashirama's cells that he then takes out of his mouth and puts in his wounds. And literal decades later, these cells assimilate into his body and awake the Rinnegan in him, which restores vision in his right eye, which he lost by using Izanagi. And also, awakening the Rinnegan allows him to summon the demonic statue of the Outer Path, also known as the Ghetto statue, also known as the Husk of the Ten-Tail. And using this in combination with Hashirama's cells, he believes he's able to create an army of white Setsu. And as years go by, Madara formulates the Eye of the Moon plan, also known as the Infinite Tsukiyomi plan. Essentially, Madara thinks he has found the perfect plan for peace. However, Madara is dying and knows he can't accomplish this plan in his lifetime, so he needs to find a disciple. And he kind of found two people, Nagato and Obito. Madara essentially took his Rinnegan out and transplanted them into Nagato's face without him ever really knowing because he was so young, with the intention that one day Nagato would use this Rinnegan to bring Madara back to life. However, if he wanted Nagato to do that, he would need somebody to steward Nagato in that direction, and that person was Obito. And now we have Madara finally building towards his plan. But the way that Madara builds towards his plan shows us a lot about his true motivation. You see, already with the Eye of the Moon plan formulated, Madara has taken out his own eyes and transplanted them into a child without their consent. He has also abducted a fatally wounded Obito and put a cursed seal on his heart after healing him using Hashirama's cells that will essentially destroy his heart should Obito ever go against Madara. Think about this long and hard for a second. The reason that Madara and Hashirama came together in order to form Konoha was to make sure that no kids would ever fight in battle again. Nagato had the Rinnegan transplanted into him so young that he couldn't remember how he got them. And Obito was 13 when Madara abducted him. Now, mind you, of course, Obito was already a Genin in doing missions for the Third Great Shinobi World War. We're not talking about Konoha, we're talking about Madara. But in order to make sure that Obito was on Madara's side, he would have to do something that would make Obito hate Konoha. So he had the hidden Mist Village kidnap Rin. But not only just kidnap her, transplant Isobu in her and then try to Trojan horse her back to Konoha. He then orchestrated Obito seeing Kakashi murder Rin so that she wouldn't go back to Konoha and destroy it with Isobu. More children being used in order to fulfill Madara's goal, when the loss of Izuna was the reason that he wanted to enact the Eye of the Moon plan anyways. And after seeing that, Obito became his faithful disciple. Moving forward with the Eye of the Moon plan in Madara's passing. With that little tidbit of history done, we can now talk about Madara's motivations. Obviously, we've already touched on the fact that Madara wanted to enact the Eye of the Moon plan in order to stop the cycle of hate and war within ninja culture. Essentially boiled down to its most basic tenements, he wants peace. I'm gonna give my 2 cents in my opinion on Madara's plan and how it pertains to just general ideologies, and then I'm going to play devil's advocate. So essentially, Madara wants peace, correct? However, Madara's entire life has been mired with anything but peaceful actions. During the Warring States period, Madara had multiple opportunities, some which while Izuna was still alive, to reach out for the olive branch that Hashirama was reaching to him. Because mind you, Hashirama was purposely stalemating every single battle between him and Madara because he couldn't see himself killing a friend. Tobirama also, and you would already know this little tidbit if you've seen my You Know Nothing video about Tobirama, was trying to push for peace even harder than Hashirama. So from the side of the Senjus, there was an entire generation of shinobi trying to end the Warring States period, even after Tobirama and Hashirama had lost 2 of their brothers. But even if you chalk up these choices to not choose peace as non-consequential because Madara was probably not the leader of the Uchiha yet and very young, there's also other opportunities, like after the death of Izuna. See, after Izuna's death, Hashirama and Tobirama and even the Uchihas themselves wanted peace with the Senju. In fact, the Uchihas wanted peace with the Senju so badly that a lot of them defected to the Senju after Izuna's death, showing Madara not only that he was on the losing side, but also that peace was findable between the Uchiha and the Senju. Because it's not like the Senju were exterminating these Uchihas who were defecting, they were letting them in as a precursor and a pretense to Konoha's foundation. But once again, Madara chose war over peace. And you could say, well, yeah, he just lost his 4th sibling, you'd be angry too. And that's fair, I guess, when you ignore the fact that both Tobirama and Hashirama had lost siblings as well. And I'm sure all of the Uchiha defectors had probably also lost siblings. But even in the face of defeat, when Hashirama offered his hand up to Madara to find peace, Madara asked for Hashirama to kill himself. And only when Hashirama accepted it did Madara recant. Once again, until the very moment rejecting the concept of peace. And from the very day Konoha was established, Madara was a dissenter of Konoha's foundation, essentially saying that it was going to end in the Uchihas under the boot heel of the Senju, once again flying in the face of a peaceful notion. And then there's the difference in how Madara and Hashirama looked at relations with other villages. You see, what Hashirama wanted was peace. What Madara wanted was control. See, Madara knew with the strength of Konoha's combined union of the Uchiha and the Senju that they could put the other villages under the boot heel of Konoha. And those villages, in the full awe of the strength of Konoha, would never rise against them, and thus a version of peace would be achieved. See, there's really 2 ways that people boil down leadership: diplomatic and totalitarian. Essentially, with diplomatic leadership, you can talk about things, you can work them out in peaceful unison. However, this leadership is not without its pitfalls. Humans are inherently tricky and selfish. They will 99 times out of 100 act in their own interests. And so if somebody in a position of power acts in their own interests in a diplomatic environment, it can break the whole thing down. Totalitarianism is essentially ruling with an iron fist. It leaves a significant less amount of choice and freedom, but it also has more security. These systems usually have heavy penalties for anybody who breaks the law, and therefore much less freedom. And while on the outside these systems may look more secure, they're a lot less fun. Essentially, people live in fear, and they don't break the rules because of that fear. But within just the Naruto universe, we've actually seen how this system doesn't work. Look at the Hidden Mist. You see, you could say that the Hidden Mist was cast into a totalitarianism system by Obito. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how they got there. What matters is that they were in one. And the Hidden Mist had very loyal soldiers and very powerful soldiers. And maybe from the outside, it looked like it was more stable. But just like with any totalitarianism system, people would run away and defect, or even try to launch coups. And Zabuza and possibly Kisame led a coup against the Mizukage, and almost every single one of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist left. Well, in the short term, taking choice away from somebody seems like it will add stability. In the long term, it makes people crave freedom. You see, the tricky thing about sentience is that people always want new and different things. We're not a hive mind, we're not worker bees. And while some people can work with a boot heel on the back of their neck, there will always be those who crave more. So unfortunately, a purely diplomatic ruling system won't work because humans aren't perfect, but an iron fist ruling system won't work because humans want freedom. And this is where Hashirama and Madara align. So essentially what I'm telling you is that Hashirama wasn't correct, but neither was Madara. Ironically, the person who was correct in all of this was Tobirama, because the system that works is a system that uses diplomacy when it's important and an iron fist when it's important. Humans are not perfect, but they do deserve faith. And taking choice away from humans only creates larger problems down the line. And this is where the problems arise with the infinite Tsukiyomi plan. The concept of security or freedom has been talked about in literature for as long as there has been literature. The most important and prevalent book that talks about this topic, and a book that most of you have probably read, is Fahrenheit 451. This book tells the story of a future world where all literature that could lead to war or hateful discussions has been destroyed. So the Bible, the Quran, the works of of Charles Darwin. Anything that could lead people to a polarized view that would put them against each other has been destroyed. So now basically all you have are the works of Dr. Seuss minus the Lorax and every Clifford the Big Red Dog book ever written. And because this information is not out there and now people have no reason to be opposed to each other, society looks like it's perfect. There's no war, people don't hate each other, there's no hate crimes, but there's an underbelly to this entire society. And this underbelly is people who look for that banned literature. And they read this literature and they hold these opinions and they talk about these things. And while some people may fall on other sides and therefore disagree on certain topics, they are informed. And while they live in the bottom dredges of society, running away from an iron fist government trying to kill them and the information they hold, they're happy. Because it's human nature to ask why. And this relates perfectly to Madara's infinite Tsukiyomi plan. See, what Madara is offering is a perfect world. A world with no conflict, no hate, no difference of opinions. Essentially, what he's offering is heaven. But within this heaven, there's no conflict. And to have no conflict in a world, that means there must be no difference of opinions, which means every single person on Earth must have the same exact opinions about everything. And this heaven is unique to every single person brought into it. So let's say there's a dude out there who just loves kicking baby seals. Everybody within his infinite Tsukiyomi dream is gonna be like, hey man, that's a great idea. I didn't like the way they were looking at me. I'm gonna go put my steel toe boots on. But there's a reason that this isn't heaven. And ironically, that reason lies within Madara himself more than anyone. Humans crave conflict. We are warmongering apes, but it's actually a lot simpler than that. Humans desire a problem to fix. And whether that problem be big or small, it is still a problem. And Madara's entire life is conflict. His first conflict was overcoming Hashirama, something he couldn't do. His second conflict was leading Konoha, something he couldn't do. His third conflict was getting the Uchiha to leave Konoha, something he couldn't do. Ironically, his fourth and final conflict was getting the Eye of the Moon plan off, something he couldn't do. Madara wasn't making the infinite Tsukiyomi for the world. He was making it for himself. Let me read you Madara's speech from the 4th Great Shinobi World War, one of the most iconic speeches of all time.
Listen, in this world, wherever there is light, there is also shadows. And as long as the concept of winners exists, there must also be losers.
See, Madara his entire life has been a loser to Hashirama, and he wants to create a universe where he is no longer that. Because at the core fundament of how the Eye of the Moon plan is brought into action is war. A war that didn't exist before. And just like when Madara went to the Hidden Stone Village in order to beat up Mu and Inoki, he was creating conflict that otherwise wouldn't have arose, going directly against what he aligned as his primary core value, which was peace. And this is because Madara reveled in war. He loved it. He just hated losing it. So no, what he was trying to accomplish was not the correct thing. Freedom will always be more important than security. If humans never persevered through conflict and weren't allowed to ask questions like why, I wouldn't be recording this right now for you. But let me talk devil's advocate for a second, because obviously I do have a bias and an opinion. So let's talk about the opinion that Madara is correct. Well, there's definitely points in it that I agree with, and actually core tenements of my personality that are aligned with this argument. Essentially, this argument states that everybody is the master of their own universe, the god of their own creation. And this is the part that I agree with. Your brain, this 7-pound lump of gray matter up here, creates quite literally everything you see. Yes, there is a physical world around you, but your brain creates that world around you. Well, not creates the world, but creates how you exist within that world. This bottle is blue to me, but blue to me is based off every blue I've ever seen in reality. The blue I see could actually be yellow to you, even though you also call it blue. My yellow could be your blue. My blue could be your yellow. But because every single blue you've ever seen has been called blue, you look at this and you see blue. Have I lost you yet? Probably. Essentially, perception is reality. However you see something, that is your reality. And whether that thing technically be real or not, if you are perceiving it, it is real to you. When you perceive a dream, it seems real to you until you wake up and you realize that dream was exactly that, a dream. But within the context of the dream, it is just as real as your waking reality. So essentially being cast into a dream that is essentially what you would define as heaven would be no different from reality. That is to say that because you would be perceiving this dream as it was real, it would be no different to you than being outside of the dream. Because once again, perception is reality. When you dive into the inner nuances of this argument, though, a couple of cracks begin to appear. Essentially, yes, this dream would become reality for you. However, that reality is the manipulation and the creation of somebody else, not your own mind. And therefore, even though it could be perceived as reality and therefore freedom, it would still be a manipulation. But that's only if you draw a line between virtuality and reality. Essentially, this is something that humans have struggled with for a long time. Think of SAO and the way that SAO has a full dive VR experience. Hell, you could even think about VR in the regular world. Hypothetically, everything you perceive in that VR world, be it in the real world or SAO, is technically no less real than anything you experience on Earth, within the confines of this argument. The only thing that's different between this physical world and the VR one that you're experiencing is the line between virtuality and reality. And if we as humans can delete the line between virtuality and reality, we should be able to realize that anything experienced on any plane of existence is real, because we as the masters of our own universe and the creators of everything around us are perceiving it. And therefore, just because it is technically run by electricity and ones and zeros, it is still technically real. And therefore, there's no difference between me taking a sip of this water bottle in real life or in VR. Now, as to whether or not we as humans want to delete the line between virtuality and reality is not something I'm going to get into right now. It's a very long conversation, but that's essentially the core fundament of this argument, that anything perceived, whether it be technically fake or not, is real. So now that I've equipped you with all of the knowledge on both sides of this argument, where do you align? Tell me in the comments below, was Madara correct in his infinite Tsukiyomi plan, or was his manipulation of the greater human will the wrong thing to do? And while you guys are waxing poetic about deep theological issues, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. You know, every once in a while, I just have to make a video where I show you I know big words.